Welcome to the Arena Decklist podcast. I'm Jerry Thompson, joined as always by Brian Gottlieb. And I'm going to be honest, I haven't been playing a ton of Magic, and this podcast is going to be weird. We considered doing basically another Outrage episode. We may or may not get there.
Well, I think the general trend is people are getting sick of us being outraged, which is understandable because I'm pretty sick of being outraged. So I am trying to stay away from that. I don't know that this is so much a positive show, but it's one where we're going to focus on Magic cards, at least to start with, and then we can see where our train of thought takes us, see what other topics we want to delve into. You know what I noticed is that the vast majority of the negative feedback I get about our content comes from YouTube. And it's so funny because we don't even do anything on YouTube anymore. All we do is just post the podcast over there. But the comments section on YouTube is like 99.9% of the mean things that people have said to me about my content over the last year.
God, do I need to go read YouTube comments?
No, I know don't do that.
I know that's a rule, right? But so like, since we haven't been doing things on YouTube outside of just reposting the podcast, I haven't really had a reason to go venture over there. You know what I mean?
Well,
so
I
kind of just forgot that the comment section existed. So like, how did you end up over there?
Because I hate myself mostly. And I need to make sure I know all the mean things people say about me. And, you know, that's one of the reasons you and I weren't super comfortable with the YouTube platform, is we were seeing a lot of that. But the reason we still continue to do it, honestly, is just because some people were like, hey, the filter blocks Spotify or whatever at my work, but I can still get on YouTube and listen to you that way. Right. So if the podcast is there, it helps me out. And
which doesn't make any sense, right?
No. I mean, look, trying to understand a work environment and the way they structure their filters is not going to lead to any kind of reason. But I know it works for some people, and I am happy to provide that and keep things easy for them. And then just have people occasionally yell at me over there too, to just really keep me in check.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had a fair amount of people who were like, why aren't you on Podbean or Stitcher or whatever? It's like, I've never heard of these, but okay, sure. You know, I'll look into it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what we're doing for YouTube too. If that's the case, though, why don't we just turn off comments?
Well, that's a good question. We certainly could do that. I mean, that's really bad. If you care about these things, turning off comment is like horrible for your algorithm engagement. So I think the answer to that was that at some point we were trying to build a YouTube channel. Obviously, our goals have shifted away from that, but we just didn't really adjust to stop allowing comments. But we could do that. That sounds good. Just outlaw all criticism of us. You have to like the Arena Decklist podcast, or you are not allowed to speak to us.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's my policy personally.
I'm down with criticism. I'm kind of curious to hear about the folks who don't like the outrage, at least if they haven't come from YouTube.
Well, so let's talk about it here. I like talking about it here because I think it's interesting. I think because there is a good point, and what these people, there seemed to be a trend of like, do you guys even like Magic anymore? Because you seem so upset about it. And I would respond to that with, I don't like Magic. I love Magic, which is why I'm so upset about it. Like, I want things to be good. I want things to be better. And I can identify a lot of things that are not at the moment. And I feel to just silently accept those things, like regardless of how impotent my outrage may be and whether it's affecting anything or not, it would crush me to just pretend like everything is okay. Like that's not who I want to be. I want to be forthright and honest. And, you know, even in moments where I'm not in love with the way things are going, I am still thinking about Magic. I'm still caring about Magic. I'm thinking about how Magic can get better. And also, this is something I discussed over on Twitter. Like, we do this for a living, and that's not to say I am just here for a paycheck. But if you're going to be able to make the content when things are good and you're excited about it, you have to keep doing it when things are bad. Like you don't get to just stop because you're not super interested. And, you know, I think that's going to be reflected in our work sometimes. Could we do a better job of maybe not letting it get to us so much? I think so. I think that's a fair criticism, actually, and something I'm trying to take to heart. But I don't think the response is just like, oh, you guys must hate magic. Why don't you go do something else? Because we want magic to get better. And because this is what we do. We have devoted our lives to this thing, and we're going to be here making content through the hard times. And then we're going to get back to good times at some point, and we'll make the content in those eras too.
We got to keep it real, though. You know,
I agree.
If things are bad, I am not going to act like they aren't, because that is not fair to our audience. And
I couldn't agree more.
I think that, yeah, maybe we could present it better, or like we can speak about it in a way that is firm or disappointed, and maybe not necessarily lean into outrage or whatever. And like, we haven't done that very often. I think that there, you know, like handful of casts where we're actually just mad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously people are going to comment on the most recent thing because that is what they remember, et cetera, but whatever. So yeah, I am going to keep it real for, you know, now and the foreseeable future, of course. But yeah, presentation matters for sure.
Yeah, something to think about. Trying to think if there's any other outrage directed towards us that I could share with you. That was the only recent thing. I think some of the other stuff goes back a while, and it's rare. I mean, I think we have a very appreciative fan base on the whole. And
are those comments from like YouTube robots, or are they from actual human beings?
They seem to be from real humans. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how these humans find the podcast, because it's kind of weird. A lot of times they seem to be users who are just like finding us for the first few times, or aren't really familiar with us, because, you know, it's saying something to us like, do you guys like magic? I think our long-term listeners know the answer to that. Like,
I mean, there's a big difference in the question if it's like, do you guys even like magic, or do you like magic anymore, right? Because if you say the anymore, then you're kind of demonstrating that you have a history with us and our content, right?
Sure. No, that's a fair point. And it may have been phrased that way, honestly. So I don't want to discount that possibility. I don't know. I just find this stuff interesting to talk about, because I have a very I don't know what the right word is, fluctuating relationship with content creation. And I think a lot about the psychology of being a content creator, and how I present myself as a content creator, and how my content has changed over time. And all this stuff is things I think about. I like thinking about things on a macro scale, and, you know, what it means to produce magic content. For now, I mean, full time, I've been doing this about 3.5 years as my only gig. And I was doing it before that point as like a side gig. So I'm probably like 5 years deep. That's a long run, I think, in this field. I don't feel like a veteran. I feel like I started, you know, and maybe that's just because I work with you, who actually has been doing this maybe longer than, you know, almost anyone in the game at this point. But the relationship definitely evolves over time. I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. I look at you as a content creator going further back than that, because you're on, like, you know, the occasional podcast or whatever a decent amount of the time, I feel. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you were certainly not making big bucks or anything, but
no.
You know,
no,
you were involved in like honing your craft and all that stuff, like way back. So
trying to learn, trying to see how it was done. And I think still learning, still trying to figure more stuff out and figure out how to do the best job in a weird time. And my relationship with magic has certainly changed. I think all of our relationship with magic has changed, whether by choice or not, with the pandemic. Like, that shifted everything for so many of us, and we've all had to adapt through that. And it's interesting to think about how we've been adapting.
Yeah, I mean, we had a short conversation before the cast about how to potentially adapt in all of this stuff. And I have some ideas, but it's different than what we are used to doing, which makes it difficult.
It is learning whole new skill sets. And I think that is mirrored in so many aspects of society right now, where we're just all learning to work differently, to do different things. And, I will just say I appreciate the people who are still with us as we go through that learning process.
Yeah. So, semi-outrage time. You ready? Number one.
Semi-outrage. Half outrage. Let's do it.
So in this case, we are going to talk about Brainstorm being suspended in Historic. Now, this is a thing that I'm not really outraged out against. I'm just kind of like, yes, obviously, and disappointed that things played out this way, I suppose. So Brainstorm gets suspended in Historic. This is kind of coming off the heels of Time Warp just getting outright banned. And it was like, wow, everyone's playing blue decks. And like, maybe the win rates of some of them are very good. The win rates of some other stuff that people play, like Izzet Phoenix, kind of like hovers around 50%. And they decided to get rid of Time Warp. And now with the Brainstorm suspension, they're citing some win rates from like Jeskai Control, Izzet Phoenix, where this is kind of similar to the Marvel ban, where they're just like, it's not even doing that well, but y'all complain a lot, so we're going to get rid of
it. I can't fathom the thinking that would, first of all, make you think Brainstorm would be okay in the format. Second of all, not allow you to see the warping effect it has had on what the format is about, what is viable, how the format is played. It has just fundamentally changed everything. And to cite win rates as like, oh, this isn't that good. Look, you're using arena ladder win rates, and this is not going to be a particularly like pleasant thing for some people to hear, but I think it's worth sharing anyway. The competition on arena is really bad. And I don't just mean at like lower levels. I mean like mythic level competition. It's not that good in comparison to things like the old Pro Tour competition, or even like day 2 of a GP. The mythic ladder just doesn't track to those things, and relying on win rates from there, it's like, yes, but you have a system which is abusable by volume. We talked at length about how there's this entire, pairing algorithm that is designed to, if you use worse cards, put you against people who are also using worse cards. And if you lose a bunch in the beginning of the season, you get to like free roll into the late part of the season. And it's just broken. It's not a real reflection of the quality of Magic being played. But you could talk to anyone who knows anything about Historic and ask them if Brainstorm is having an outsized effect on the format, and is it the best card in the format? And the answer was a resounding yes. It was incontrovertible, and it was also obvious it was going to be that way from the very beginning. So I don't understand the tone that accompanied this announcement. I'll say that.
Yeah, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, because obviously we're just expecting the worst from Wizards at this point.
Sure.
But I really, trying to take a step back and look at this announcement holistically, I can't really see much else other than like, we don't think it's a problem, but we're going to get rid of you, or rid of it. You're welcome. And
yeah, there's also weird contrasts too with like, oh, Time Warp was a problem because there was X copies, but there was like 31 copies of Brainstorm in a top 8. And for some reason, that's not a problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just like, well, yeah, but it's like the enabler or whatever. So it doesn't look that bad, versus like there being a bunch of Okos or Uros or something like that. They're just like, well, these decks are like built around this card, and like they cast this card and it helps them win the game. But then it's just like, well, yeah, like a lot of people play Steam Vents. We're not going to ban Steam Vents. Yeah. It's like, it's not the same thing. Brainstorm is, the engine, right? It is the only reason why these decks are like showing up a ton and winning a bunch. It's just like adding infinite consistency to everything, which the rest of the format doesn't have. Like for a while, it was like, oh man, Black has Thoughtseize and Fatal Push, and like no other color comes close to having this amount of early interaction. And now Blue has like all this card drawing and really good, really powerful cards like Memory Lapse, and the other colors don't really have that. And it's just like, we need things to get balanced out, and then maybe you could try doing this. But like, I really recommend against giving like one color a bunch of tools and then just ignoring the others, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you could have taken the shot and like let swords to plowshares and lightning bolt through and I'm not saying you should have done that, but if you were that convinced that you have to do brainstorm, it's like you have to let other power through too. You can't just let brainstorm come. And we talked after the time warp ban that you can do this. You can go after time warp, but we're going to be back here in a few months as you go after the next thing. And that was always going to be the problem with brainstorm. So I want to get to the distinction between a suspension and a banning with like some text that accompanied the suspension, suggesting that, oh, we'll look for a point in the future where maybe brainstorm could come back. What does that point look like? Like, what changes where this is not a good idea now, but it will be in the future?
Well, I like how, I'll just read the sentence. While our most recent actions in Historic have been banned, such as those for Time Warp and Thassa's Oracle, those were cases where we had clear and convincing data showing the cards were problematic. In this case, the data is less clear, and that is exactly where we prefer to utilize suspension. First of all, that sentence isn't really correct, right? Like, you're making assumptions that Time Warp was the correct thing to remove in the format in the first place.
Right.
Which, you know, sure, fine. That was definitely one of the cards where we're like, this is going to cause problems, right? But I feel like you could have removed Brainstorm at that point. And you could have made a very strong case for Brainstorm being the problem.
Yes.
So that doesn't mean that Brainstorm is a card that you suspend instead of ban. But it's like, yeah, fine. I like Brainstorm. I like casting it. I think it's, you know, really bad for long-term health of formats that it exists in. But you know what? Everything is such a giant shit show at this point, man. If they want to at some point down the line unsuspend Brainstorm and let me cast it again, cool, sure, whatever. I guess we're just doing these things now, right?
It seemed that way. I mean, it seemed like all bets were off and we're just letting the format go to nonsense. But it's like this half measure. Like they don't commit to any vision or any idea for what Historic is supposed to be. And also, I don't know what to make of this, but it's become kind of infamous now. I know you're a fan of the Receivables podcast, and
half of the
podcast. Which half is that?
I think when I say that, people are like, "Ooh, does he like Cedric or does he like peaceoli?" And I just mean the first half of the podcast.
Oh, okay.
When they're talking about like the olden time, because you know I was around for all that stuff.
Got it.
Cedric and peaceoli are both gas, but like, you know, giving grades to like cards in the set, I'm just like, yeah, whatever.
So
I still usually listen to all of it for whatever that's worth, but I'm lazy.
On the Receivables, peaceoli finds out that Brainstorm is legal in Historic.
This was good. This was money.
And just cackles himself to death because it's unbelievable. But here's the question I have to ask. Peaceoli works at Wizards and like has 20x years of experience with Magic and is a veteran game designer, and seems to me like exactly the type of person who you would check in for some feedback. I mean, everyone's got different job descriptions. I don't know exactly what Patrick's job is at Wizards at this point. I think he has maybe gone through a couple jobs at this point. But it certainly seems like you could check in with him, right? And like,
you could, or you could make the assumption that you know what you're doing, and you know you have a team that knows what they're doing, whatever. And Patrick is also one of those people where it's like, yeah, does he know about like organized play, and does he know about like this format and this format? Yeah, but can you loop him in on everything? Nah, like you got to draw the line somewhere, right? And sure. I think like him just sticking to doing his job is like also pretty valuable. Just spending more of his bandwidth on that versus like, hey man, should we put Brainstorm in Historic or Demonic Tutor or whatever? You know,
I can't refute that, but look at the level of response, right? It's one thing if like his response is, I'm not sure about Brainstorm. Seems like it could be a little dicey. But where it's just minutes of cackling, that shows how far off the mark this decision was in the first place. And when you're going that hard, you're changing the history of this new nascent format, which is a pillar of your go-to enterprise right now. I mean, I have to think they still view Arena in that way. And this is 50% of all constructed play that's going to happen. I mean, obviously there's like, I don't know what the breakdown is between standard and historic, but this is a large percentage of the play that's going to happen on your platform. It's big to have a vision for this thing. It matters a lot. And this is, again, it represents a fundamental shift when you choose to include Brainstorm in your format. And it just seems like it's all kind of thrown together and we'll see what works. And I just wish there was a little bit more care. And I also wish I could have some of my wild cards back, because the ripple effects when you ban stuff in historic they're huge. They change everything. And I do think the format the format's kind of changed. We could talk about that in a little bit too. If we're done with Brainstorm, whenever you're done with Brainstorm.
To improve format diversity, Brainstorm is suspended in historic.
Yeah. Okay.
Not because it's busted. Anyway.
So the best Brainstorm deck right now, based on data that I've seen, based on win rates.
Okay, hold on. You can't make a claim.
You can't bash data and then use data?
Pretty much.
Okay, fair. That's fair criticism.
I think that you can bring it up independently. That's fine. But I would not base your argument on that data.
Based on my play, based on what I've experienced, good case that Izzet Phoenix is the best deck in the format prior to this Brainstorm ban. Now, we're done with Brainstorm. It's gone. I think there's a good case that Izzet Phoenix is still the best deck in the format. Do you want to know why? Because when you introduce Brainstorm, you introduce another card where we were like, I don't know about this. It seems like you're going to create an engine and you can go at the cards around the engine, but at some point you're going to have to address this engine, which is too powerful for modern. And that is, of course, faithless looting, which is still here. And now this gets to be the pillar of the format. And is it a little bit more narrow than Brainstorm? Sure, absolutely. It does more narrow things. But as long as this thing is present, it's going to fuel the best things in the format. And Izzet Phoenix is right up there, still doing its thing. It existed in modern just fine without Brainstorm. You're going to play some worse cantrips, but the deck is still going to do its thing consistently. And it has a game plan that's good against everyone-ish. It's picked up powerful cards, things like Expressive Iteration when it needs that. There's a whole new set of removal spells the deck is able to use that it didn't have access to before. So it just keeps getting better and better. And it plays that style of consistent, semi-proactive game plan, which is really, really strong in the hands of experienced players, and that they default to a lot of the times because it does give you that level of consistency.
You want to know the funny thing to me?
What's that?
Is that if Jeskai Control and Izzet Phoenix are the two biggest decks, and they get rid of Brainstorm, which was
you killed one for sure,
which was far more of a help to Jeskai than it was to Phoenix, because Phoenix uses looting as a Brainstorm effectively and uses it very well.
Better Brainstorm in a lot of cases.
Yeah. What I think would be hilarious would be for Phoenix to just cannibalize all the Jeskai shares in the metagame. Like say it was like 20% Jeskai and like 15% Phoenix. Well, now it's just like 35 or 40% Phoenix. I think that would be hilarious.
I think you might get your wish. I have some concerns about, again, the vision for the format that this band presents.
I don't think that it's going to happen, because almost regardless of how powerful or well-positioned Jeskai was in the metagame, there were always people playing it. And I get that. Like, the blue cards are all pretty awesome. And then you had things like Lightning Helix to encourage splashing, and the mana's not heinous or anything. Like, it's definitely doable. So there's really like if you want to play control, there are very few downsides to being like, oh, I can just, sleeve up Jeskai cards and do okay. Right. So maybe it shifts the other way and it's like 25% Phoenix, 10% Jeskai control or something like that. But I think that it would be hilarious if Phoenix did just cannibalize that market share. And I think that is like something that you need to take into account when you're like, well, in the interest of format diversity, we're getting rid of Brainstorm. And it's like, well, does that actually help? Right? Like, people are playing Brainstorm a lot. And if we get rid of it, what actually happens? And I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, people play blue decks less, because looting still exists and is fueling Phoenix.
You bring up a really interesting point. I feel like maybe this is rose-colored glasses. I'm interested to hear your opinion. I feel like when we used to talk bans, going back probably 5-6 years ago, when bans were like on the table, but not omnipresent the way they are now.
In case of fire, break glass.
Yes, in case of emergency. I feel like the way we thought about it was with these type of ripple effects. Like, okay, if this happens, what is the next thing to go on? And maybe there's some really good evidence of this type of decision making affecting the ban process when you look back at Rampaging Ferocidon, which is a card that I think very much, when it was banned, everyone scratched their head and it didn't make any sense. But it was trying to show some foresight and trying to predict what the next thing to go on in the metagame would be.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately really benefited that format. It seemed strange at the time, but I came around to the idea, and as it was presented, it made sense to me. I thought it was kind of a really smart ban. I don't think that's happening anymore, or at least that's not the way the discussion is framed these days. It's just like, this card is broken, get rid of it. And that's the end of it. That's as far as we go. And to be fair, the problems are way more about just raw power, right?
In standard, yes, but you can literally see what you're talking about in the instance of the Time Warp ban, right? Because they're like, oh, Time Warp's a problem, get rid of it. And then everyone was just like, really? Like, they're still Brainstorm, right? Yep. And then I don't even know, was it like a month ago that happened or something? And now they're already like, yeah, okay, fine, Brainstorm's gone too. And it's like, if you just sat there and thought about it, right? Yeah. Ask peaceoli, right? To just shoot him an email.
It does seem like a little bit of the foresight is missing, especially when it comes to historic, which is this fly by the seat of your pants type format, which I've enjoyed. I'm sick of my wild cards being incinerated, though, and I mean, I'm such a sucker. I say these things and they just keep getting more of my money. I bought so many foils this week.
Business expense, dude. In the case of like buying the historic cards and like getting the reps in, it's like, we have to do it for the content. And like, I don't know. I also did because it was fun, right? Like, I'm not gonna lie. I played a lot of historic. Right now, I'm enjoying modern a lot still, but definitely when the archive stuff dropped, I'm like, this is horrible for the format, but like, let's go.
Yeah, let's have a few good weeks for sure. I remember feeling the exact same way.
Yeah, man, not stop buying foils, but like, maybe curb that a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. You and Janelle should have a talk. I think you could get on the same page about that particular.
I think we're already there, man. I think we're just like psychically linked, at least in that regard,
Well, you are probably the two humans on this planet who suffered the most time with me. So it makes sense that eventually you guys would align on some very clear things.
Like, dude, Brian, just finish your TV show, man. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, she has that one all the time. She just abandons me at this point. She knows I'm not coming back for it. She's just like, I'm just going to finish it. And yep, go ahead. That's fine.
Yeah, you're never going to be mad, which is good. Like, you're at that place of mutual understanding in the relationship.
Yes. Yeah. I'm thinking back to like my college roommates when like we shared our dorms together. And I had an ex-girlfriend who came and she went to a different college and she stayed with us for a while. And she's like, I don't understand how you guys get along with each other. It just seems like you don't care about anyone's feelings. Nobody looks out for each other. There's no rules. And yet you guys all love each other and there's no problems ever. And I explained to her it was because we worked on a system of mutual disrespect where you just disrespected everyone all the time and you could do whatever you wanted, but they could do it too. And it all kind of balanced out in the end. And we all just loved each other and accepted each other for these weird things we all did. And it made for a good living situation.
Like, I get how that works. I understand it. That is terrifying to me. I hate that.
Oh, look, it had long-term psychological repercussions and made it very difficult to be in that situation for a long time. But also, we're like stupid college kids. Most of the time, we're just like drinking and playing video games anyway. I certainly weren't like studying or going to classes or anything like that, because who would do that in college? So it worked in that moment. As a long-term plan, no, do not do that. It's not healthy for sure.
Well, I think it's probably important to point out to you that, like, when the archive stuff dropped, and obviously we had our reservations with what does this mean for how y'all feel about Historic and like what's going to happen to Historic in the future. And once we came to that conclusion of like, oh, it's just messed up, then we said like, okay, let's just like embrace the messed upness of it, right? And we certainly knew that the Mystical Archive was going to lead to some bannings at some point, and now we're seeing the first iterations of that. And I don't know, just I feel like I'm reliving this, right? And that I shouldn't be, where I'm having all of these same reactions again, like, really, you're putting Brainstorm in the format, and then like they get rid of it, and I'm just like, oh really, like now you're removing Brainstorm from the format? It's like, dude, just shut up. What is wrong with you? And so okay, they got rid of it. That is a net good thing. Criticisms aside, this is good, right? For long-term health of the format, they said they might bring it back. Don't do that. But for where we are now, this is still like baby steps, right? It's like format needs some more cards, some new strategies need to get juiced a little bit. Maybe looting will have to go at some point. Like, we'll have to see, whatever. But like, it's getting closer to not as much of a shit show as it was when the archive first came out. So cool.
Yeah, slow, steady process towards normalcy. I do have concerns about what baseline normalcy looks like, though, too. Like,
we passed
Mystical
that point.
Archive.
We passed that point.
Okay, we just can't deal with that anymore.
I think it doesn't benefit us at all to harp on that, because that ship has sailed, man. It's sunk cost, right?
Okay. I'm trying to think how I can still lobby for a cat oven ban in the format, despite the fact that like all bets are off and everything's nonsense.
Well, okay, so you do that, and then it's like, okay, well, now this Arcanist deck is the best thing, or what, you know? Like, if you think about the ramifications and like the cascading effects, then you're gonna have to just ban a ton of stuff, probably.
Right. But that's why I think the cat oven argument is actually good and stands on its own, because it is very much rooted in the play experience as much as it's rooted in this deck has an outsized win rate. And I think that's, in a lot of ways, when you're dealing with the arena crowd, more important. I mean, we were here last week talking about the standard 22 ban, the Book of Exalted Deeds, and both being like, yeah, this is a good ban. This makes sense, with no knowledge of how good that deck actually is and how much it matters. Just like, especially when it comes to arena, there's going to be some things when you treat it like a video game that you have to adjust to. And I think the video game experience derived from cat oven is a problematic part of the format.
Okay. You ban book, you're one and done, most likely, right? Cool. Very, very clean, very early in the stages of the format's inception. Cool. It's over and done with. Just tear the Band-Aid off. For this, and we're seeing it, right? Like, you get rid of Time Warp, then you have to get rid of Brainstorm, and then they'll have to get rid of something else, and it just keeps going on and on. And I agree, like, cat oven should not be in the format, but then you have to ask the question, like, what do you want the format to look like? And what I want the format to look like is like minus 20 of the cards that existed.
Right.
So if you're like, I want to ban cat oven, okay, so say they do that. Are you going to be happy, Brian? No, because the format's still messed up.
Well, I mean, trying to make me happy is a long-term failing proposition. I think there will always be something I could bring back to the table. But is there somebody you can make happy?
Maybe. I don't know. But I feel like when you approach bannings like this, where it's like, oh, just every couple weeks something gets banned, that sucks. Versus like, all right, we've decided what we want the format to look like. These are probably going to be like the best things to be doing in the format. Everything else, get out of here. We're banning like 5 cards or 10 cards. That initially is a shock to a lot of folks, but then eventually things recover. Versus like, well, I ban Time Warp. Okay, well then I'll just build Phoenix. Okay, well I ban Brainstorm. And obviously Phoenix is still good, but then you're just like, oh, okay, I'll build food. And then they're like, well, ban Cat Oven. And it's just like, damn it, why do you keep doing this to me, right?
Enough. This is enough.
And whereas if you just banned all the stuff at one time, that person's never going to like build each new best deck down the line and just get hosed every time. Which, in the short term is probably like a good business decision for them, right? Is to just do it one at a time. But like,
I don't think that's motivating them.
It's not. It's not.
It does work out in their favor, but
it's too small time. But
yes, very much small ball.
It is. It's funny to look at it like that. I mean, I guess like they do push for short-term revenue gains in favor of like longevity.
But that's so small though.
It is smaller than that. I agree.
Yeah, individual wild card receipts. I can't imagine that's actually influencing the discussion all that much.
I mean, I don't have that many rares and mythics, and I've spent like, I don't know, definitely over $1,000 on Arena. Maybe
let's not talk about how much we spent on Arena. It's not a pleasant. That's another thing you and Janelle could probably bond over and try and get me in order about.
It's a business expense, baby. What I mean, unless are you buying like the foil stuff and the pets?
No, I stopped doing it. I did do that early on, but I stopped.
When Arena,
I realized that was nonsense.
When Arena came out and Magic was dope, I was all about that. I was like, hell yeah, give me my shiny Ops
my Nexus of Fate deck was blinged out. Like my first Simic Nexus of Fate deck that I like. The first time I climbed a Mythic with it, it was a beautiful deck, and then I'm like, this is dumb, and I'm not doing this anymore.
I had to go through that on Magic Online. I may have told this story a couple times where I was playing this Mystical Teachings deck in Standard, and at the time, the only thing on Magic Online that had mana leaks was 8th edition. So I had this entire black bordered deck, except for these ugly, ugly white bordered mana leaks.
That's a beating.
And I was, playing some Magic, hanging out with Neil Reeves, and he looked at my deck and was like, dude, why do you have those ugly ass white bordered mana leaks? And I was like, well, it's, the only set that mana leak is legal in. He's just like, I ask you the same question. Why do you have these ugly ass white bordered mana leaks? I'm like, what do you want me to do, man? You want me to cut mana leak? He's like, no, dude, just get foils. The foils are black bordered. So I was like, oh, damn, that's hella smart, right? So I buy these foil mana leaks, and then I'm like, why do I only have 4 foils in my deck? So I started foiling out my deck, right?
You have to, yeah.
So I had like the entire deck foil, and then, that rotates. I build a new blue-black deck, and now I have like some watery graves and like some mana leaks or whatever, but the rest of it's not foil. So I'm like, oh, I guess I gotta get it all foil to match, right? And just, there's like this, I don't know, 6-year stretch or something where like all my stuff on Moto was foil. And I'm still feeling that to this day, where I'm like, oh, I need some violent outbursts, and it's like the only ones I have are foil, and I'm just like, damn it. And it's
tough.
It's especially bad because the foil economy is garbage. Like the foils are cheaper than regulars, but like it might seem like genius, right? Like, oh, well, if you want to buy a $10 card, just buy the $8 foil one. But then instead of selling it to a bot for $9, you have to sell it to them for like half of what you paid for it.
Yeah, so, very strange arbitrage decisions when it comes to the foils. I know I also dabbled in Moto foils. For me, it was a point where I was playing so much Moto, and I was winning a bunch. I was playing mostly Jund, and I would just sit there and play Jund leagues in Standard all day because I loved playing the mirrors. I thought the deck was great, and I just foiled out the deck top to bottom because I had basically 4 of every card in Standard and didn't know what else to do with my winnings. And I'm just like, okay, time to foil out this deck. And like you said, it creates this thing. I mean, this is what I deal with in paper now, where I'm like, well, I have, X amount of these cards in foil, so I may as well get the rest of them. And now everything new I buy, I just buy in foil. So I'm starting to get out ahead of it a little bit, but then I go to build a deck and I'm like, well, do I fill in this empty backlog of foils? Do I need to get these cards? And now I'm like, updating Amulet. And I'm like, well, all these new cards have been added to the mix since the last time I played, and I probably need to get them in foil now. And it just never stops.
Yeah. And then someone like me is like, hey, do you have like 2 breeding pools I can borrow? And you're just like, yeah, they're foil. And I'm just like, well, I can't use them then, because the rest of my stuff's non-foil. And yeah, you build new decks and you run into that same sort of issue. And yeah, the obvious answer is we'll just foil everything. Forehead, right? And
man,
no.
Magic is a hell of a business plan. I'll always say that. They figured it out. They did a lot of things really well.
Yeah, so now I just turn off all the styles. That's the good thing, right? Is that they're just card styles. They're not like, oh, I have foil ops and regular ops or whatever.
I can do that in Arena? Like I can stop looking at the styles?
Yeah.
This is big game.
You can turn off yours. You can't turn off your opponents. But
that's enough.
You can make it so your deck is not mismatched.
Okay. That's been a problem with the Mystical Archive stuff. Like a lot of that stuff, I just have like weird random duresses and things like that.
Yeah, that one's weird. I haven't figured this out. And I know that this is going to be probably an easy solution. And a lot of people are going to be like, you're not very smart. Why did you not know this? But like, I have the Japanese duress. So I try and play with that. And then it uses, like, it shows up in the deck list as like the Japanese one. Uh-huh. And I know that no matter what, when you play, it's in English, right? It's like, it doesn't show it to you in Japanese or whatever. But then when I like draw a duress, it's the yellow bordered one. And I don't know why.
It's weird.
Maybe that's a known issue. Maybe I'm messing up, but it's one of those things where it's like, I went out of my way to acquire this thing because I wanted like this artwork, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you purchased this, right? Like you have to buy these.
I think I bought one of the packs because I'm just like,
I thought you were done with the blinged out game.
He's looked up. I mean, I am, but like you mess up every once in a while, right?
Right. Oh, well, I will say, I just in the mail got my foil Japanese Mystical Archive Abundant Harvest. That is one of the most beautiful Magic cards I've seen in a long time. Like just the way the background is with the foiling, it's almost like the background is almost pure foil. Like it just shines. And it's amazing looking Magic card. There's not many Magic cards where I look at it and I'm like, ooh, wow, what a foiling process. Or it really stands out to me. But the Japanese foil Abundant Harvests are awesome.
All right, I am Googling this because I have not held it in my hands. I don't know.
Yeah, until it arrived, I was not expecting the effect to be as dramatic as it was. It was really nice.
Yeah, I mean, there's mostly just like images of the card. It's like, oh, here we go. Oh yeah, this looks nice. This does not look like a Magic card, but it looks really nice.
No, it doesn't. And usually, like I want my blinged out stuff to look like Magic cards. Like that's my, that's the distinction I look for, and that's why I don't like the like metal secret layer stuff. Even though I really like that general art style, but something about these. They sing to me, and my Amulet deck has a bunch of weird foils anyway, like a bunch of full art stuff, and I think it's a fine fit.
Yeah, you're always getting like the hideous like PTQ promos or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I love those weird foils.
Some of the secret layer stuff, it's like you cast the Dreadbore, right? And someone's like, is that even a real Magic card? Like, did they make something that was in that style? At least the Abundant Harvest is like, yeah, okay, that's like a weird promo, but like I could believe that that's a thing that they would actually do.
I can't imagine how difficult, if we ever get to do live Magic again, and if I ever get to call a live Magic tournament again, if somebody wants to make my life a nightmare, it's laughably easy at this point. Like you could just make it so I can't do my job. And I remember a match you and I covered of someone who had like all, I don't know if they were playing Lantern or Affinity or what, but it was all masterpieces. And it was also a time shifted match. So it was like a higher speed. And you and I were just like, we can't call this match anymore. We're done, because you couldn't tell what anything was. It was completely impossible.
Yeah, you just start talking about it from the other person's perspective.
Yeah, so there's certainly a lot of tools to make a broadcaster's life miserable at this point.
Okay, so now I'm on eBay. I'm looking at someone who has an auction up for the Japanese Mystical Archive Time Warp foil, and it just looks so good, man. It's like, there's no borders on the cards, right? And the text box isn't like fully opaque over the art, right? So it's like you just get to do the consistent foiling on the entire card, and it just looks really nice.
Yeah, that's the way the Abundant Harvest felt to me too. Like it's just consistently foiled throughout. And like I said, it's rare that a card will strike me with like the foiling process, but those ones stood out for sure.
Yeah, no, those are really good, and they don't look like Magic cards, but they're believable Magic cards, right?
Mystical Archive in general is such a cool thing, and it's so weird to like spend the beginning part just bashing its effect on Historic, but like as an idea, I really like it. I think it's really cool. And I also obviously am a big fan of like when they do these Japanese alternate arts. I think that's really awesome as well. And it just is like, that's the kind of collectability I think I really enjoy. And when it's in packs, it's like chase rares. That seems a lot more real to me than like, here's a secret layer of nonsense. So the collectability stuff is definitely something I embrace in a lot of ways. And even if I think they've jumped the shark with a few things they've done over the past few years, Mystical Archive stands out to me as one that they did really well.
There's like 6 or 8 versions of every, or not every, but like a lot of the good MH2 cards,
Yeah, that has been confusing. I'm just starting to fill in my MH2 cards now. And it's so weird. Like what is, like, for instance, I got my Urza Sagas and I'm like, well, which ones do I get? Normally I try and get like the most premium version available. Just because I think like from an investment standpoint, you generally get paid out better on those things.
Yeah,
with a little bit more upfront cost, but in the long run, it works out.
If you decide that you're going to get foils, definitely get like the textless or like, full art, whatever, foil one versus the regular, because it's going to command a premium in the long term, assuming it's like a good card.
Yep, that has been my experience. But with like Urza Saga, it's just the regular foil and then the sketch foil, which doesn't look that good in my opinion. I mean, it doesn't really even seem all that different to me, but that's the one I ordered because I'm like, what else do I do here? And it's strange to me that there's no like extended art version. There's no, I don't know, whatever other treatments, old board. I don't know how you do an old bordered Saga land.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem, is that it's a saga, so it's tough to do those treatments. I'm sure they could have come up with something, but like consider a regular Ragavan versus like the different art one or whatever. It's like, I don't know if you can really do that with Saga. They just did the sketch one instead, and
they could do like the Ice Cauldron effect, right? Where it's just like a land and it has all the wordy text in the text box. That would be really cool. I would like that. It's a bad idea, but I would like it.
It would be one of those cards where it's like 2/3 of the card, right? It has like the expanded text box.
Yes, I would be into it.
Ugh. Okay, so where does Historic go from here, or does it matter?
The first step is like, how good is Izzet Phoenix right now? It still seems very good to me. I'm not saying Brainstorm isn't a loss, but it still fundamentally does the same things. I think after that, you move on to the Rakdos decks. I think Dreadhorde Arcanist is still an incredibly powerful card in the format. It also abuses Faithless Looting very well. Look at the combo type stuff. Mizzix Mastery being powered by like Torrential Gear Hulk. There was people who, they were mistaken, but there were people who were playing Jeskai Control without Brainstorm already, which is wild to me. Absolutely. Absolutely. I promise, if you go and look through events, there are people doing it. I don't think it was correct, but some people found success with it. And I think the idea of Magma Opus into Mizzix Mastery or Torrential Gear Hulk, that still works in some cases. So I think that deck does have a chance. But the starting point for me is probably Izzet Phoenix, some type of Rakdos Dreadhorde Arcanist deck, and then Jund Food. You got to look at that pesky cat oven interaction. And that's my 3 starting pillars to explore.
The floor on Brainstorm is so low. Why would you not play Brainstorm?
I don't have an answer for you. I wouldn't have done it. There was no way from the time Brainstorm was printed. And look, this wasn't that uncommon of a position either. Like a lot of people, when Brainstorm was first printed, were like, one, this card isn't going to be good. And you saw lots of versions of Control that didn't have Brainstorm. As time went on, you would have thought that would have been completely just beaten out of their system. But still, there are people doing it right up to the end, for sure.
People just like being contrarian, I think. But like also if you're like, okay, my deck is built optimally and you have like 100% confidence. And I'm not saying like you think you have 100% confidence, like, say that is somehow a reality that could be true. At that point, you should still probably be looking at decks that contain Brainstorm and building the best versions of those that like are good and operate with Brainstorm, because your deck is kind of fundamentally flawed in a format where Brainstorm is legal. No?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, if you come to the conclusion that your deck should have Brainstorm, it's like, well, this is probably a bad deck.
Yes, that is a very good rule.
Anyway, SCG Tour Online is back this weekend. A bunch of standard events. You have anything to share in regards to that stuff?
No, I mean, like, we talked a bunch about our standard exploits with the printing of the D&D set, and we were like on to some stuff, but none of it has really broken through in any meaningful way. But in fairness, there hasn't been a chance for it to break through. And I am curious what people have come up with, if any of the ideas we were into have been pushed a little bit, or if people have found some other things to explore. I saw like an artifact-based deck that did well in one of the Magic Online challenges that looked interesting.
Black Staff.
Yep. Yeah, trying to do the old anime trick with like Treasure Vault and the 1/1 flyer for you. Yeah. So, underpowered cards, but a cool idea. And I was happy to see someone trying something new. And I will do my thing where I look at every single satellite and then I write an article over on SCG about all the interesting technology to come out of it. So I am super excited to have the SCG tour back, because it's such a good source of information for me. And I always enjoyed writing those articles. I always liked seeing what other people were up to. And this is the first chance really for technology to break out. So short of what we spoke about in previous episodes, I don't really have anything new to offer. If you were asking me to play this tournament blind, I'd probably play Sultai. I know it's a disappointing answer, but like the deck just does some things where, especially if people are like not respecting it enough, it's going to run over the first event. We'll see. I would expect Sultai to be really strong in the satellites and weaker when it comes to Sunday's main events. I saw that trend a lot when it came to analyzing these events, where against these wider fields, these super powered decks would just overwhelm what everyone else was trying to do until Sunday came. And then, often better players have qualified, or at least they've given some real thought to what the metagame looks like. And then tides tend to shift a little bit when you get to the Sunday event.
Yeah, that's pretty normal. So you get to play Fun Police. Yeah. But then when it comes time to actually like playing against people who are first and foremost like trying to win, then it becomes tougher, because like you know that they're trying to beat you, right? And it's a tall order, but people go to extreme lengths to be able to beat Sultai because you kind of have to. So I mean, you're still Sultai, you still have like a decent chance, but it's not like, you should not let your results from the qualifiers inform your decision for like the main event kind of thing, because it's like your 65% win rate or whatever is not going to translate.
Yeah, I mean, you see those swings, I am telling you, all the time in these events. It happened over and over on the SCG Tour Online. I probably studied more SCG Tour Online results than any other human on the planet. So take my word for it. Don't be so sure. Even if you do have like a great Sultai list for the satellite, you need to reconsider come Sunday very carefully.
Yeah. Think Corvold is still good. I might just play mono white, but I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm not playing because whatever.
I was my jaw almost dropped for a second there when you said I might play. I thought you were speaking like affirmatively, like you might actually. Okay.
No, so there's a modern showcase this weekend, and
nice.
I'm tempted to play in that actually. I've played a few of the challenges. My sleep schedule is super erratic, as evident by me trying to take a 2-hour nap and like oversleeping this podcast by 3 hours, but.
Yep. You slept through our 5 p.m. Recording time today.
Listen, I'm like kind of on European time, but I also sleep only like 3 hours a night. So
okay, that's a tough schedule.
Occasionally, it hits me where I'm like, all right, I need to bed for a little bit, and I don't know what it like. Normally, I can get up to my alarm, but for whatever reason, recently there have been times where I like set a bunch of alarms and then I just still sleep through them. And
now you just like hard sleep through it, don't wake up, or do you get up and turn it off?
So it's kind of unclear, but in this instance, because it was a work thing and I knew that I needed to be up, I put my phone on the other side of the room.
So you just chucked your phone across the room, and that was the end of it.
No, I put it on the other side of the room so that like if I wanted to turn it off, I would have to physically get up, at which point I would get up.
Oh, and then you slept through it at that point.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just get to the point where like the alarm just, turns itself off or whatever. But
yeah, that's never happened. I've never had that experience where like an alarm's going off and I just don't acknowledge it, except when I used to like drink a lot. Then I could occasionally do that. But since I stopped drinking, it has not been something that has ever happened to me.
Yeah, I mean, given how little I'm sleeping, there are just instances where I'm in such like a deep sleep because I'm exhausted, So I understand that happening occasionally, but in this instance, I rolled over at 8 and was just like, oh shit, because it definitely felt like I slept for more than 2 hours. And it was obviously like, pitch dark out. And went to my phone and like the alarm was still going off, but it like wasn't making noise. It was like it snoozed itself or something.
It had enough. It's like, look, this isn't going to work. Let's just pack it in.
Yeah, if I keep doing this, like your battery's going to be dead, like whatever.
All right. Probably good work from your phone.
Yeah, occasionally that happens. But what are you going to do? Modern is dope, dude. You need to play some Modern for real.
I do need to play some Modern. I am slowly amassing real Modern cards on the off chance. Moto only, huh?
You have a Card Hoarder's account, man.
I do. Thank you, Card Hoarder. I appreciate that. I could log on at any point and shuffle up some virtual Magic Online games. And I want to, because you do have a sweet deck right now, and it's I don't know. I see you get occasional bursts of credit for it, but I also see a lot of people talking about it and not really mentioning that you put the deck together and
that's
seemingly
fine.
have been crushing. Yeah, whatever. I mean, certainly not the first time that we've experienced this type of thing. But
so I wrote about it. This is Grix's mid-range deck, right? And then Daryl tweeted about it, and he credited me, but it's like. It goes to show the ways in which information flows in like current Magic day and age, right?
Yep,
where it's like
different.
He has a tweet that gets, I don't even remember, it was like 50 to 100 retweets or something like that. And he got like a lot of traction on it. And that is where the vast majority of people saw the deck first, because like my article was also locked behind a paywall, which it's not anymore. So, if you want to figure out how to actually play the deck, like you can probably read the article. But it's interesting to me where it's like something gets tweeted. I think it was like 4 days after my article went up, and now it's just like that is where the vast majority of people know it from.
Changing content space. We started the podcast talking about it, and here it is looping back again. Things just work differently now. I did see also Michael Majors recommending your deck on Star City today in the Modern What We Play column, saying that his games are comically easy with the deck. And you could see why. This is just like a strategy that you have employed so many times and are extremely comfortable playing this type of attrition deck where you're just like run them out of resources, have one trump that'll eventually snowball a late game. And it's a style I also like quite a bit as well. And it also makes sense to me that Daryl would find success with that deck too, because I equate him with that style of play very strongly.
There are a handful of people that I think would be able to pick up a deck like this and intuitively understand what they're supposed to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a slight against anyone else, because a lot of us, like me, Majors, Daryl, and like Daryl's got a lot of range, and like so does Majors too, but like a lot of us have spent time working on like Delver decks and Flash and Callblade and stuff like that. Like this is kind of our home, right? So we just understand these sorts of decks and like how to make them work, which is generally involving some sort of like sidestepping strategy where everyone thinks that you're doing A, but you're actually doing like C, you know? And I think for a lot of people who pick up this deck, like, you know, for context, it's like Dragon Rage's Channeler, Ragavan, Snapcaster Mage, a bunch of spells, right? A lot of people pick up this deck and they're like, well, I have to kill my opponent with creatures, right? And it's like, no, they're just 1-mana cards. I don't even care about them. I just don't. Like, for the Rakdos Lurrus decks, for example, like, you might want to Inquisition your opponent on turn 1 before you play your Dragon Rage Channeler. And in this deck, I will do that if there's like something that I don't have an answer to, right? Like maybe I'm playing its Amulet or something and I want to like snipe their Amulet. But for the most part, it's like, I'm not trying to protect this thing. Like, please spend your mana and your cards on this thing. Cause it's
your
like
time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to race, right? Like, I'm going to beat you with Snapcaster, Kolaghan's Command, Lurrus. That's it. That is my plan from start to finish. If Ragavan connects, cool. Like, I get some mana, maybe a card. Eventually you're going to have to deal with this thing. And like, that is just perfect for me because yeah, you're spending your mana and your resources on doing this. And the reason that matters is because you play against Rakdos or Izzet, and a lot of the time, like, yeah, their bolts are dead until they're not dead anymore. And then they just string like 2 or 3 of them together to kill you. And these are cards that like just trade with lightning bolts or like trade with their creatures or whatever. But that's like the biggest thing where it's just like, the creatures don't actually matter. And I think that was not the case for Delver, but it was certainly the case for Caw-Blade, right?
I think there's also some like green-white tokens to be drawn upon as well.
No, that too for sure, because people would like, oh, I have to like kill their Nissa, and I'm just like, cool. I'm just gonna Evo Leap, Hangerback, Walker Avacyn you. You know, it's just everyone was like, oh, I gotta board in like my sweepers. And it's like, yeah, cool, dude. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, it's fundamentally misunderstanding the goals of the deck you're playing against or playing with. And like you said, I do think there is a level of unintuitiveness that comes with trading off these stupid creatures. But I get it. I see what you're going for. And that end game of just like, here is my stupid value creature that will eventually, and I do mean eventually, like it'll take some time, but it will eventually start a resource snowball that you are not equipped to deal with.
Yeah. And, you know, so it starts like as nickel and diming, right? Like you play your Lurrus, you get a bobble, they kill your Lurrus, cool. You know, you Expressive Iteration, that's a clean 2-for-1. Snapcaster Mage, clean 2-for-1. But eventually it just gets to a point where, you know, you have 6 lands to their 4, you have 3 cards to their 0, and you just find a way to win.
Classic Magic, love to see it. This deck is on my to-do list for sure. Again, slowly amassing these cards in the theory that like I'll play them someday. They'll probably get banned before that, but I do think Modern's in a very cool place right now. I don't know if it's in like a good or healthy place, but ultimately it's sort of like the historic thing where that ship has sailed and just like do fun, cool stuff right now. And it's starting to feel a lot more like Legacy to me, which to me is a compliment. Like, I think that's a really good place for the format to get to eventually.
Yeah, it's Legacy, but not busted. And if you want to define format health as there is a strategy for you, like no matter what type of Magic you like to be playing, you know, Modern has it. Those things do exist. And there are definitely a lot of complaints along the lines of like, there are too many Lurruses, too many Lurrus strategies. There are too many MH2 cards. Like, the vast majority of decks that are tier 1 right now are based on like Urza Saga or Dragon Rage's Channeler or whatever. And I get that. I'm sympathetic to that. But at the same time, it's like, it's still Modern. You have answers to everything. And this isn't a format or like a version of Modern where there's something that's just like super frustrating, where it's just like, well, I can't play Jund because then I play against Tron or Boggles or whatever. It's like, there isn't really that sort of thing. So like, you just get to sign up and play some pretty good games of Magic as long as you're prepared for the other things that people are doing, you know, like there are definitely people dying on like turn 2, turn 3 to like Colossus Hammer or whatever, but like, that's a big part of the format and you should be prepared for that. So,
Right. I think if you go look at like Modern leagues too, it's still got that vibe of like anything's possible.
Right.
And as long as Modern can hold on to that, that is the most important thing for Modern to be able to do, is just keep that dream alive where you can kind of show up with anything. And you don't have to be able to win a big Modern tournament with all these decks, but you have to be able to 5-0 a league. And as long as you keep them in that sweet spot, and then I think Modern's doing really well.
Yeah, you can still play Jund or Abzan. You can do elemental stuff. There's a bunch of different like Omnath control decks, like some ephemerate stuff. There's a couple different combo decks. Like I'm telling you, man, there's something for everyone, and the format is pretty fun. Obviously, there are some things that are like frustrating, but it's not as bad as it used to be. And maybe once, I don't know, like if Grand Prix come back, or if they do more big online Modern tournaments and people kind of like flock to those, it's like I could see the format getting to a place where maybe there is a very clear best thing and like action has to be taken or something. But like right now, that's not the case.
Do you think there's some kind of lesson to take away from how Modern Horizons 2 succeeded? Because it does have these individual outliers, which feels sort of problematic, but on the whole, it achieves something really good. And to me, the thing that stands out is how much power it placed in efficient, cheap creatures.
Yeah, I was going to say creatures. And you look at Dragon Rage Channeler, Ragavan, Voidwalker, Sanctifier, and Vec. It's like, wow, these cards are really good. And like, I would not have been confident like suggesting like that style of card, because I'm just like, well, maybe that's just like too generous, right? But having these cards that are like rest in peace kind of hate bears is obviously something that like Modern would have wanted for a while, and they both have fairly relevant abilities. Like Voidwalker has evasion, and then I don't know, occasionally you like Thoughtseize, take their Emrakul and then cast their Emrakul. Like I don't know, that's kind of cool, I guess. Like Sanctifier has protection from like the two big removal colors, right? It's like these cards are so generous, but then you look at the format and it's like they're just doing great things for it, honestly. And if instead of the format being like, well, I'll kill you with like Deceiver, Splinter Twin, or whatever, they're trying to kill you with Dragon Rage's Channeler and Ragavan, it's like that's net positive for the format as a whole, even if it does kind of silo like all the decks into being DRC decks.
I agree. I also think there is some of that lesson that could be translated to Standard. If you want to talk about the sort of sameness of Standard right now and how things feel, we talked about how there's different types of end games, but they're all sort of doing the same thing, like almost a mid-range soup where you get to Goldspan Dragon, or you get to Alrund's Epiphany, or you get to Immersion Ultimatum, and it's always just about building up to this end game. And even like Edgewall Innkeeper, despite the fact that it's a 1-mana card, it's not a 1-mana card. Like that's not what its effect is in line with. It's an engine. It's just a micro-sized engine. I think more of just like small creature that matters for its impact on the game, and not its ability to eventually become something more, or not eventually represent 10 cards in hand. That's the biggest thing that feels like it's missing from Standard 2 right now. And I think some of the success of Modern Horizons 2 could be ported over to Standard to make the format feel a little better.
When I look at Standard 2022, it feels like a lot of the cards are just really interchangeable, and it's like, well, I'm doing green black kind of like sacrificey value stuff, or I'm doing green red like kind of attack you, maybe play some dragon stuff, and it's just like, oh, you want to cut like this 2-drop for this 2-drop, like whatever, it doesn't matter. And it feels like a lot of those decks don't really have identity to me, where it's just like, oh, we are building around this card specifically, right? Instead, it's just like, well, there is a critical mass of like creatures and burn spells, so let's go. And that kind of makes me a little bit sad. Whereas before, and this is not necessarily like an endorsement of these archetypes, but it's like you had the Heartbeat deck and like the Solar Flare deck, which was like based on Unburial. Like you had all these like build arounds, and you
feel very different.
Yeah, and you have that with like Sultai Ultimatum, but that's like a bridge too far, right? So that's the only thing that kind of like feels like a deck to me. And I guess that's not even an S22, but you know what I mean. same holds true for standard outside of like adventures, meaning you just have to play like some cards that say adventure on them, and like the rest of the cards are interchangeable. So
yeah,
when you have a thing like Dragon Rage's Channeler, and then it's like, well, okay, Delirium, what do I want to go with that? Okay, Mishra's Bauble, can we play Luris? You know, like that feels like a deck to me, whereas a lot of the S22 stuff doesn't, and it's kind of sad. Like you look at the mono white aggro decks, right? And it's just like, you know, do you play Alseid or Selfless Savior or Usher or Monk to go with Grandmaster? It's just like, it doesn't matter. It honestly doesn't. Like all the cards are like fine. You can swap out anything for anything else. It doesn't really matter. And then it's just like, well, this doesn't really feel special to me.
Yeah, see, I like that interchangeability. I think it's something that they leaned into in like the Ravnica Allegiance era, and something that they did very well.
I think it's awesome.
But it's got to come with diversity, like broader diversity in archetypes. And they can't all, despite the fact that all these archetypes are able to make these moves, they're all doing the same thing in the end.
Right. And yeah, it's another part of the problem too, where it's like a lot of mid-range soup kind of stuff.
Yep.
Or like aggro kind of leaning mid-range, which, you know, is I think I would settle for like Torbrand aggro over Cavalcade of Calamity aggro. Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then it's like, well, all the decks curve like 1 to 4, and then you just like Embrick leave them. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, the identity of Cavalcade is, it's realer. It feels more distinct, so that's a plus. And maybe it's also more easily specifically interactable. Like a lot of interaction is just generically good interaction, especially when you look at like color hosers and things like Mystical Dispute, where, oh, my opponent has blue cards, so this thing is good. Or go back to Aethergust and, oh, my opponent has red and green cards, so this thing is good. And it's all very generic interaction, as opposed to, okay, this deck has a clear identity, thus it has a clear weakness.
Right. And I cite in my Disenchant or Cry of the Carnarium or something, and they have a really hard time with it. And there's not, like, Sultai looks like it, but there's not a thing that you can do against it that actually does that.
Yes, it overcomes everything. It goes too big.
Right, which makes everything sort of frustrating. And yeah, the sideboards now are like 1 Rip Apart and a couple Drannith Magistrates and like 1 Run Afoul, and it's like these little things that you add in to get small edges, but you can only play a small portion of them because it's not good against the entirety of their deck. And yeah, things like that. I kind of don't like it, you know? Versus like Modern Spirits is something I just thought of, where it's like, yeah, you want to board in like Windstorm or Cloud Thresher or whatever. It's like, yeah, you know that they're going to have flyers. Doesn't matter like what kind of game we're playing here, right? Like your Run Afoul is always going to be live, whereas you play against like mono white aggro with 4 Maul the Skyclaves, and you're just like, well, I kind of want to Run Afoul them, but like I can't board in too many, right?
Yeah. No, it's a good distinction. It's an interesting distinction. And hopefully something that will be considered going forward as we try and find ways to be positive and love Magic again, which I think we did a medium job on this cast. We'll see how the YouTube comment section takes this one.
Yeah, didn't get too outraged, but we also left out a thing that I think that, you know, we had in our back pockets is like a thing to talk about. Which is
maybe we'll save that for when we need more outrage and more anger.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess we just kind of like cliffhanger them where it's a cliffhanger that may or may not ever be revisited. We'll see.
It's got a different name in radio. What do you call that when it's like
it's like a zinger or something? I don't know.
No, man. Now I can't even complete the analogy I'm trying to make. It. This has gone completely off the rails. End this podcast before it gets worse.
Game.
Good luck.